Hello, I'm Liz Lumley of Finextra, and today I'm speaking to Chris Dunne of VocaLink. So we're going to talk a little bit about infrastructures. And you know, VocaLink, of course, has been supporting the UK environment for quite some time. But you know, the payments landscape is in a period of a lot of change right at the moment due to, of course, regulations and the digital age that we're all in the middle of. So, you know, what can the market infrastructure really provide then?
I mean, you're right, we've been operating clearing services for 40 years, or actually over 40 years now, and the landscape's changed enormously over those 4 decades, and in particular over the last 2 or 3 years. So you're right, there's a huge weight of regulation, or soon-to-be regulation, hitting the banks, plus an awful lot of competition. So their tech stacks are full, they are fully occupied trying to just keep up. And this is where market infrastructures can play a big role and are playing an increasing role in the industry. It makes much more sense, it's much less risky to do things once in the centre than to do things multiple times federated amongst the banks. So a good example of that is the cash ISA switching service, which is live, and the current account switching service, which goes live in the middle of September. Most of the heavy lifting, all of the movements of direct debit standing orders and the redirection of payments gets done once through the central infrastructure rather than from bank to bank. So there are big cost benefits and risk benefits there. There are also benefits around the data. A bank individually can see its own data. We see all of the data in the centre. We see both sides of a transaction, so that places us in a unique position to be able to spot fraud, for example, and that's something we're starting to look at much more earnestly around AML, CTF, sanctions checking, but also fraud generally. The issue for central infrastructures like us is we don't own that data. It's banks' data, not ours, so we need to be very mindful of the legal requirements, but there's a huge opportunity to leverage central infrastructures more than we're currently doing.
Excellent. So I'm going to move on to everyone's favorite ISO standard, ISO 20022. So what benefits do you see for this upcoming data standard for market infrastructure?
The ISO 20022 standard means different things to different people, and people get very focused on the technology or the requirements around it, and they forget about the business case. Now, there's a very clear benefit to people at either end of the payment chain. So somebody initiating the payment, somebody receiving the payment will benefit from additional information. It's obvious. But the business case for banks and central infrastructures is much harder, and that's one of the reasons why it has taken so long to get there. If there was a clear benefit for everybody in the chain, we'd be there by now. If you look in Europe, the only reason Europe has moved towards ISO 20022 is they had to. They were dragged largely kicking and screaming because of SEPA towards that. And even then, it's a just good enough implementation rather than a really full implementation. So there are clear benefits. Everybody recognises we need to get there. You'll have fewer payment failures, you'll have richer payment information, you'll have new services. And government in particular is looking at the benefits of putting payments and remittance information together to be able to support things like universal credit and other government initiatives. So the trick is to find the 1 or 2 big projects that will drive ISO 20022 through the banks and the payment infrastructures and give us a business case. Otherwise, it's going to struggle. We could still be here in 5 or 10 years' time and not have a full ISO 20022 implementation. So the key is, I mean, from a central infrastructure point of view, the benefit to us ultimately is we have a much better service to deliver. Instead of just simple payments with very little data, we will have a very rich payment service, but it's being able to build a business case that will give us the 100 or 200 million that's needed to re-architect the central infrastructures needed to actually make that a reality. So, I mean, you mentioned SEPA pushing ISO 20022 in Europe, but I mean, are you talking for the UK projects or business case, or a SEPA type mandate to push it forward? I think we thought the PAYE real-time information would be the stalking horse to be able to get ISO 20022 into the industry, and that didn't quite come about. But new services such as cash ISA switching and account switching, they are ISO 20022 compliant, so the messages that come in are in that format. The key is going to be migrating things like BACS and faster payments from their existing legacy systems, which those formats were from, particularly at the BACS standard, was from magnetic tape. So standard 18 is probably a 40-year-old standard. And it's being able to find those extra additional benefits that benefit everybody in the chain that will then be able to drive the business case to be able to change from end to end. It's not enough to simply convert from ISO 20022 to standard 18 and back again. That gives you a very small benefit. The really big benefit is if I can send in a payment along with e-invoicing, for example, or with PAYE data all the way through the chain. That's where you see a real benefit to everybody, including UK consumers.
Excellent. Chris, thank you very much.
Thank you.